Today I want to talk about another document that you probably haven't heard of, and it's the recently published NATO document on psychological warfare. It's called Cognitive Warfare, or the Battle for Your Brain. And this is really relevant because it really fits in with all of these other white papers and documents that we've covered. Most people don't look at these kinds of things. They don't cover this kind of stuff, but we focus on that here because this really gives us an insight into how the world really works, how the system really works. And this document talks about the importance of managing threat perception in the sense of looking at other countries as supposed threats and reorganizing man's analysis of himself, changing images of man type ideas to view humans as platforms. Platforms are now humans, which is exactly what another one of these documents says, the transhumanist document from the UK Ministry of Defense that we're going to look at here in a moment. But this is a basic psychological warfare approach that sees the human as a kind of walking modem, basically. You're going to be an emitter and a receiver of the information that the system downloads into you, quite literally. And it's another element of what the Pentagon many years ago titled full spectrum dominance. There's a great book by F. William Engdahl called Full Spectrum Dominance that outlines what that exactly means. And from the NATO perspective, they want to basically create a hybrid form of warfare against all forms of enemies, economic, cyber, information, and psychological warfare. That's part of this full spectrum dominance. It involves hacking the individual. So at a literal brain level, not just a mental thought level, but also in the sense of the cells, the gray matter itself being hacked, literally like Johnny Mnemonic or something like this. The vulnerabilities of the human brain will become more and more sophisticated and susceptible to this kind of social engineering. This also brings to mind old psychological warfare documents like The Mind Has No Firewall. If you've never read that, I recommend that we may do that as another one of these videos as well. In 2020, NATO sponsored a study on this new form of warfare, which they called cognitive warfare. And if you know about the integrity leaks, it's very similar to that, if you want to look that up. But the brain is the battlefield of the 21st century. The report stresses that humans are the contested domain, and the future conflicts that will likely occur amongst the people digitally first and then physically thereafter. So things go into the cyber sphere, and then it becomes a feedback loop that goes into the mind. And then ultimately, keep in mind, it's not just about your thought processes, but actually changing the brain chemistry itself. Remember what Klaus said, we will be in the body, we will enter into the body. So it will be my fingers inside of you, controlling you like the puppet of the Jim Henson hand. I will be the Jim Henson hand inside of your head to control the mouth. Put your hand inside the puppet head, put your hand inside the puppet head. The human is very often the main vulnerability, and it should be acknowledged that in order to protect NATO's human capital, so humans are again really part of a energy battery capital structure in this vast AI grid. This PsyWar is intended to harm societies. That's what the document actually says. It is intended to harm societies and not only the military of their opposition. Now, you might think, well, the opposition is a foreign enemy. Russia, China, something else. No. The opposition is actually said to be anybody in the domestic population that happens to disagree with the establishment line. Wow. It's a literal 1984, and they even say that this is the militarization of brain science, the total takeover of the brain itself. This harkens back to the designs and implementation of the MKUltra projects even back into the 50s and 60s. The document goes on to say, in O'Brien level doublethink, that anyone who disagrees is thus by default part of the enemy combatant, the enemy mindset. It goes on to say that this hybrid warfare will be the targeting of the domestic population on an unparalleled level. And in fact, in 2020 and 2021, this form of warfare was used on Canadians as a test example. You can figure out probably what I'm talking about. And thus, the neoliberal ideology within the NATO agenda was part of this public-private partnership agenda that utilized psychological incentives, warfare, and attack in terms of coaxing people with goodies. Cognitive warfare defined as part of warfare in general, psychological warfare in general, seeks to change not only what people think, but also how they act. So praxis. Attacks against the cognitive domain involve the integration of cyber, disinformation, misinformation, psychological warfare, social engineering capabilities. Thus, cognitive warfare positions see the mind as the battle space and the contested domain. Its objective is to sow dissonance. This makes us think of cognitive infiltration if we think back to the old Cass Sunstein documents. The document goes on to say that a big part of this will be the implementation of micro CHIP. I'm not talking about chocolate chips. I'm not even talking about chocolate chip chicken strips, which is probably what your mouth is watering over. That's probably what you thought I meant. And I'm talking about brain chips. And this will be part of what they will institute and push as a form not of an actual chip, but actually nanotech. Implementation of nanotechnology will thus be part of the definition of future cognitive warfare. NATO researchers claim that foreign adversaries are thus the supposed aggressors employing cognitive warfare, but at the same time it made clear that Western military alliances developed its own tactics and the art of using such technologies to alter the cognition of the human targets themselves. This includes nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science. Altogether, this makes a kind of dangerous cocktail that can further manipulate the brain. Again, the nanotech. Altering the very basic thought processes of the human population as a whole. Thus, this fits in line with what DARPA has worked on, for example, for many decades. Cognitive warfare is not a war or fight against what we think, but rather against the way that we think. If we can change the way that people think in detail, he says, in detail here, very clearly, it is much more powerful and goes beyond mere info war, information warfare, or PsyOps. The document goes on to point out that it is crucial to understand that this is a game on our cognition. And the ultimate winner here will be those who don't just change the information war itself, but change the brain. Thus, there needs to be a shutting off of certain faculties and sections of the brain. The document goes on to talk about this being a method and plan of total control and mastering not just the external domain, but the inner domain, the mind itself. Now, of course, psychological warfare has always been about influencing the mind, but I don't think we've ever seen it so blatantly clear about controlling the brain processes themselves and even using advanced technology and weaponry like nanotechnology. Anyone who could target the cognitive warfare could be a target. Anyone could be a target of these cognitive warfare operations. Any user of modern tech is a potential target. In fact, the document even goes on to talk about how the usage of troll farms, and the basically co-opted people to become trolls without even knowing it. Because the more agitation and the more atomization, the document says that this implementation involves through the social media outlets, it actually fosters division, fighting, and reactions, emotional reactions that then cause people to be more and more atomized. The document then kind of goes on to point out that ultimately this is just about what DARPA said a long time ago to create Skynet. Now, it doesn't use the word Skynet, but it basically is saying the very thing that Skynet is, and it says that DARPA was the key to really bringing about all of this cognitive warfare and brain alteration. And it also made me think of how they would see, it says that they will go into the culture domain, the culture war. And thus mind control is really the same thing as culture control. Remember, we've been saying this for so long. People think that the CIA, well, they do James Bond stuff. What do they have to do with the culture war and culture creation? No, that's fundamental to what they do. And this document says that. Mastering the human domain is thus essential to master the culture domain, because culture creation steers the culture. So, in other words, mind control is literally niche control, which is literally culture control. Not only do they create the niches, the countercultures, sometimes they don't, they're organic, but they steer them. And at least that's the goal. And what is the goal? The document says the goal is total victory and total control. The modern concept of war is not about weapons, but influence. Victory in the long run will remain solely dependent on the ability to influence, affect, change, and impact the cognitive domain. Mind control. So the document is literally saying that the plan is mind control. And as we're going to see, we go through various white papers like this, as we just did with the silent weapons, matches up perfectly, right? Total continuity of agenda. There's no difference between this and what we're going to see in the British Ministry of Defense document on transhumanism. If you enjoyed this analysis, be sure to go to jaysanalysis.com and subscribe to get a membership there. $4.95 a month, $60 a year. Also, support our show sponsor, which is chalk.com, where you can get 60%. What? 60? Yes, 60% off. Use the promo code J60. I recommend the Action 2.0. If you don't like that, you can go for the daily, which is something that guys and girls can benefit from. Guys, I know you guys really want to probably boost that testosterone. You want to be an A-level moxie man like your boy right here. You don't want to be a soy. You want to fight big soy, and we do that through the Tomcat 100. Again, J60 is the promo code. Go use that right now at choq.com.